You know, every time you send an email or stream a movie or jump on a video call, you're plugging into this massive hidden network. And it's not up in the sky. It's deep, deep beneath the ocean. We're talking about fiber optic cables, the real, unseen heroes that make our modern connected world actually work.
Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking all your data is zipping between satellites way up in space. I mean, that's what it feels like, right? But the reality is actually way more grounded. A truly staggering 99% of all international data travels through physical wires. Why? Well, it's simple. Cables just offer way more bandwidth and speed than satellites ever could.
So where are all these critical wires? They're just lying on the bottom of the ocean. Seriously. We're talking about 1.6 million kilometers of cable. That's enough to wrap around the entire Earth more than 40 times. And for a lot of that journey, they're just sitting there, totally unprotected on the seabed, carrying the absolute lifeblood of our global information.
So let's pull back the curtain and explore this hidden foundation. How does this system, something so vital, yet, as we're learning, so vulnerable, actually tick?
The absolute magic of fiber optics really comes down to one simple, game-changing advantage it has over those old copper cables. It uses light, not electricity. This means your data can travel faster and much, much farther. And I'm not being metaphorical here. Your data is literally moving at the speed of light through a tiny strand of glass.
Okay, so how do you actually turn a simple beam of light into the incredibly complex data that powers our entire lives? Well, the concept behind it is, believe it or not, brilliantly simple.
It all comes down to binary code. The system is so beautifully straightforward. You send a pulse of light down a glass core. If the light is on, that's a 1. If the light is off, that's a 0. A receiver at the other end just reads these flashes, these 1s and 0s, and pieces all the data back together. Simple, elegant, and unbelievably fast.
But of course, not all fiber is created equal. On the left, you've got multi-mode fiber. It has a bigger core, which lets multiple beams of light kind of bounce along inside it at different angles. This is pretty good for sending a lot of signals at once over short distances. But the problem is, over longer distances, those signals can start to get blurry and mixed together. Now look at the right, single mode. The core is teeny tiny, forcing all the light down one single straight path. No bouncing, no blurring, just a crystal clear signal that's perfect for crossing an entire ocean.
And you can just see the incredible evolution of that short-distance multimode tech right here. I mean, the early generations, they topped out at about 1 gigabit per second. But the latest stuff, it can hit speeds of 800 gigabits per second. That massive leap forward was mostly driven by a huge change, switching from using simple LEDs to generate the light to using incredibly precise lasers.
And for the real long-haul champions, these single-mode fibers, the most important number isn't just speed, it's distance. OS1 is great for, say, connecting a few buildings across a campus. But OS2? It can send a clean, uninterrupted signal for over 200 kilometers. This right here, this is the technology that connects continents.
So we've got this amazing, high-speed global network. But its incredible importance also makes it a massive target. So let's look at the darker side for a minute. How this vital infrastructure can actually be attacked.
I mean, really think about it. If 99% of all the world's international traffic is flowing through these thin strands of glass, what are the actual, real-world consequences when someone decides to disrupt them? Or worse, listen in.
The most straightforward attack is the most obvious one. You just cut the cable. A lot of the time, this happens by accident. You know, a ship drags its anchor across the seabed. But here's the crucial part. It's incredibly difficult to prove whether it was an honest mistake or deliberate sabotage. This gives attackers what's called plausible deniability, and it's a growing headache for international security.
But a physical cut is loud, it's obvious. The threats that are much more sophisticated, well, they're the silent ones. Turns out, you don't actually need to sever a connection to steal the information that's flowing right through it.
One of the sneakiest techniques is called macro bending. An attacker can physically find the cable and carefully bend it, just enough to cause a tiny amount of light and therefore data to leak out. Then, a special clip-on device can read that leak signal, often without causing any detectable drop in signal strength for the intended recipient. It's almost the perfect invisible crime.
Now, a more invasive but way more powerful method involves inserting what's called a splitter. In this case, the attacker does cut the cable, but they quickly splice in a device that siphons off a percentage of the light signal.
It sends an exact copy to their own receiver, while the rest of the signal just continues on its way. It's kind of like putting a T-junction in a water pipe to divert some of the flow for yourself. And you should know, this is not just some theory. This quote here refers to the infamous Room 641A, a facility where the NSA allegedly used this exact splitter technique. They were apparently able to create a perfect mirror image of internet traffic and feed it directly into supercomputers for analysis. This just shows you the incredible scale at which fiber tapping can be deployed.
Okay, so the threats are clearly real, and they're significant. So how in the world do we protect this critical infrastructure? Let's take a look at the countermeasures that are being used right now to defend these digital arteries.
Well, there are several layers of defense. The first one is pretty straightforward. Redundancy. If one cable path gets cut, traffic is automatically and instantly rerouted through other cables. But things get way more high-tech. Acoustic sensing can basically turn the cable itself into a giant microphone, listening for the telltale vibrations of a ship's anchor dragging nearby. And there's this other technology called OTDR that constantly measures the light path, letting operators detect and pinpoint a new band or a tap to within just a few meters.
But look, all these physical defenses can only do so much. The ultimate safeguard isn't really about protecting the cable itself, it's about making the data completely useless to anyone who manages to get their hands on it.
And that, of course, brings us to encryption. Right now, the estimate is that about 95% of all the data flowing through these undersea cables is encrypted. So even if an attacker manages to tap the line, most of what they're going to get is just unreadable gibberish. But that leaves 5% of data unencrypted, and that could still contain a ton of valuable information, leaving a small but pretty significant window of vulnerability wide open.
So here's the bottom line. Our entire global economy, our social connections, our critical infrastructure, all of it depends on these incredibly fragile strands of glass lying on the ocean floor. And as we've just seen, while they are an absolute marvel of engineering, they are definitely not invincible. Which leaves us with a pretty important question to think about. Is this foundation we've built our entire world on truly strong enough?